my boss came up to me to wish me well. He shook my hand, and then he leaned in and he whispered, "Kill them all. They could legally be assassinated. It's going to keep your mouth shut and carry out the mission." The CIA doesn't give a shit about money laundering.
I want you to imagine for a second that your country asked you to fly to the Middle East, befriend people that were on the CIA watch list, capture them, later on find out they're being tortured more than what was being reported. And now you're stuck with a moral dilemma. Do you blow the whistle? You do blow the whistle, and then you immediately get thrown into jail. This is the story of John Kiriakou, who Matt and I got to interview. We got to ask him a lot of questions that we didn't see asked on shows like the Danny Jones podcast, where you might have seen him, where he amassed millions of views. He's one of the most interesting men on the face of this planet. He still texts with princes, royalty, politicians of the ilk that most of us will never get a chance to even have contact with. And he took almost a couple of hours to sit down and answer all of our questions. We get to ask him about interesting things like Bitcoin or UFOs, or what it's like to raise a family when you're constantly going in and out of war zones, what it's like to keep secrets from your family. I really hope you enjoy this as much as we did. Welcome to the Austin and Matt podcast. Okay, John, I wanted to start off with a question, a high-level question. This might be a little difficult. Given everything you know now, would you consider your time, you at the CIA, would you consider that as, see yourself as a good guy or a bad guy, knowing everything that you know in the aftermath?
Oh, I see myself as a good guy. You know, even when I was still a true believer, I considered myself to be a good guy because I went into the organization with my own sort of ethical bottom line. There were things that I knew to be illegal that I refused to take part in. And even after the 9/11 attacks, when I went to Pakistan, it was all about, carrying out the mission, but doing that within the confines of the law. And I honestly, truly cannot name another officer who carried out their Pakistan assignment with that in mind. Yeah, and you have to, and I'm not blaming anybody here.
Right.
You have to remember, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, there was this incredible, almost overwhelming desire for revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it. I wanted revenge too.
I
But I
remember
remember
being in high
that,
school saying
yeah,
the same thing. I remember
yeah,
the
revenge.
feeling, the emotion,
Right?
everything welled up. I remember it it was
Oh,
present for a long
absolutely.
time.
When I was leaving for Pakistan, I went into the office a few hours before my flight. And my boss came up to me to wish me well. He shook my hand, and then he leaned in and he whispered, "Kill them all." And
Wow.
I said, "Really, John?" His name was John as well. I said, "Is that where we are already?" And that bothered me the whole flight over.
Mm.
And then, once I stepped into it, I was like, no. It's not about killing anybody. It's about bringing them to justice.
Well,
Awesome.
given that mentality existed at one point in time, I wonder if it still does. And I wonder if you could comment on Biden recently authorizing the use of our weapons over in Ukraine. What are your
Right.
thoughts on
So Biden authorized the use of ATACMS rockets, and in fact, we're talking on Tuesday the 19th. Those rockets were fired for the first time yesterday. This is a significant upgrade. ATACMS, we've used ATACMS for decades. When I was serving in Bahrain, for example, we provided ATACMS to the Bahrainis for possible, thank God, not necessary use against Iran, were Iran to invade. So these are very sophisticated, very precise, high-level missiles that are going to really worsen the situation. I get theoretically why this decision was made. The idea is, if there are going to be peace talks, you want to carry out those talks from a position of as great a strength as you can muster. This isn't to defeat the Russians. The Ukrainians can't defeat the Russians. Russia is a nuclear power. God forbid, if it comes to that, the Russians will do anything that they need to do to save themselves, to protect themselves. So I think that this was a strategic decision, a very risky one, but a strategic decision to put the Ukrainians in the best possible negotiating position they can get to.
Do you think that's because when Trump takes office, there will be negotiations?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Donald Trump has been very clear, and this isn't just because Donald Trump, hates Ukraine or hates Ukrainians or loves Russia. There's a very real anti-war populist streak in today's Republican Party that we hadn't seen before, right? The Republicans were supposed to be the neocons. It used to be the Democrats that were the party of peace, and that's just no longer the case. So when Donald Trump says he's going to, end this war on day one, that means he's going to cut off aid to Ukraine, just like he said he would end the Middle East conflict on day one. That meant screwing the Palestinians. So I think it's the same idea here. So Biden's trying to get as much done as he can before he's no longer in office.
Okay. That's interesting. I heard you say on, I think it was Danny Jones, that you lament the death of diplomacy. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, in your mind, what's the role of the CIA in diplomacy in generally speaking?
That's a great question. There's not supposed to be any role for the CIA in diplomacy, but when you have the former Deputy Secretary of State now being the CIA director, and he's your go-to high-level diplomacy guy, that kind of screws up the whole system. The CIA is not a policy organization. It is a policy support organization. In fact, in the Directorate of Intelligence, the analytic arm, you are forbidden as an analyst from making a policy recommendation, right? You have to give the facts, give your analysis of the facts, and then let the policymakers make their decision. Well, if the State Department isn't carrying out diplomacy, and you've got, an incredibly senior former diplomat as the head of the CIA, you sort of give him two hats. Now, in a perfect world, that's a mistake, and it shouldn't have been done. In the world we live in today, frankly, Bill Burns is a better diplomat than Tony Blinken is. And so that's why it was Bill Burns that has been going to Doha for the last year, 13 months, to carry out these talks and to help to mediate between the Israelis and Hamas. It hasn't worked because the Israelis give us the middle finger every time we begin these talks. But I think that this kind of muddies the waters of diplomacy, that the State Department should be doing this. It's not. That's why Burns is. But in a perfect world, we wouldn't have this kind of current situation.
Can I ask a little bit more about the CIA? Because we were chatting before this, and I realized, I don't think I personally have a holistic. I don't know how to think about the CIA. I don't know how many people work at the CIA. I don't know what they do other than the other 100 other government agencies. I don't know whether they're private. They're obviously not all elected, and where their funding comes from, and is it military industrial complex? Is it can you give me just a larger overview of maybe what the CIA is supposed to be and what it is now? And
those are all good questions.
It's so confusing. I thought,
you're not alone.
Ridiculous. I was like, what a ridiculous question. But then I was like, I don't know.
No, you're not alone.
Question.
So the number of employees at the CIA is a closely guarded secret.
Okay.
Yeah, it's never been revealed. I could tell you it's tens of thousands of people.
Okay. I didn't know if it's 10,000, 100,000, a million. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Tens of thousands.
In the lower tens of thousands of people.
Okay.
So the two most famous directorates, the Directorate of Operations, which is the spies, and the Directorate of Intelligence, which is the analysts, are actually the two smallest directorates. Okay. There aren't really very many. Yeah, in the CIA,
they're the two smallest directorates. How many directors are there?
There are four directorates.
Okay.
Operations, Intelligence, Science and Technology, and Administration. Administration is the accountants and the logistics people and the paper pushers. Yeah, the back office people.
Okay.
The ones that sort of make the trains run on time. They're important, but they're not
budgeting,
approving
expense reports, booking flights, just
precisely
the ones that are making the, I get that.
Yes.
Okay.
Science and technology remains kind of a mystery to most Americans. Um, they do a whole lot of different things. Everything from disguises to forgeries to what we saw in the Vault 7 revelations, for example, writing code to infect foreign networks, coming up with viruses, liaising with the likes of Palantir or InQtel, that kind of thing. There are many thousands and thousands of people in the Directorate of Science and Technology. And then there's sort of a dotted line organization that's the Office of the Director. Office of the Director used to be called the DCI, now is the Director of Central Intelligence, now is the DCIA because of the creation of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That includes security, the Office of Medical Services, the polygraphers, the bodyguards, the investigators, all those kinds of people. And there are probably several thousand of those people as well. The budget is an even more closely guarded secret. It's very highly classified. Now, a former deputy DNI, a woman for whom I worked and for whom I have no love at all, accidentally leaked the budget back in, it's been about 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, it was $20 billion. That's a lot of money.
Wow.
20 billion.
Yeah.
Figure it's probably, I'm making an educated guess, it's probably double that now.
40. Yeah.
At least, yeah.
20 years, sure. 40, 50.
Now, you can't go look at the federal budget online and go down to the tab that says CIA and look at it, right? There is no actual public budget for the CIA. It's dispersed all through the entire federal budget.
You think AI could figure it out? Do you think if we took the federal budget and put an AI on it and said, pick this apart, do you think it could find those bits and bobs?
I think it could probably find a good amount of it.
Yeah.
But when you see, there used to be a senator from Wisconsin by the name of William Proxmire, and he used to give this annual award called the Golden Fleece Award, and it was for wasteful government spending. So if you're allocating $5 million to study whether or not monkeys like to date before they consummate a relationship, that gets the Golden Fleece Award.
Yeah.
But 50% of the time, there was no program to study monkeys' dating habits. That was a secret CIA program that they just called monkeys, dating habits, in order to hide it in the federal budget. And so, when Proxmire was alive, oh my God, the CIA hated him because he was always screwing things up by doing this Golden Fleece Award. So now most of that budget is buried in the Pentagon budget, in the National Defense Authorization Act, and the rest of it is sort of scattered around. But they only know the numbers inside the CIA.
Do you think that Elon and Vivek in the Department of Government Efficiency, do you think that what's going to happen there? Can they?
I know, right?
Because Elon's already starting to publish stories like that of wasted government spend.
Yes.
What's going to happen there?
Yeah, he's going to have to be reined in. Yesterday, Donald Trump got his very first president's daily briefing for the second term. Normally, that happens the day after the election. For whatever reason, he's probably just been too busy putting a government together. But that also tells me that Elon and Vivek have not been given security clearances yet.
Okay.
And so we're going to have to wait until they're cleared so that John Ratcliffe, the new CIA director designate, can go tell them to shut their mouths and stop talking about these classified programs.
Okay. What are your thoughts on John Ratcliffe, by the way?
Well, listen, I'm a lifelong leftist, right?
Okay.
I've always considered myself to be a part of the progressive left, to the point where I'm not a Democrat. I think the DNC is so corrupt. Listen, how can Bernie Sanders win 60% of the vote in in Wyoming and West Virginia and get 0 delegates.
I agree.
0.
100%.
It's so corrupt.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me, I believe that the entire system needs to be shaken up hard. And so, do I agree with John Ratcliffe on issues? Probably not on a single one. But he's a bomb thrower.
Yeah.
And I think we need a bomb thrower.
Mm.
And same with Tulsi Gabbard. I've always liked Tulsi Gabbard. I've always respected her. I disagree with her decision to join the Republican Party. There was no reason to join the Republican Party. She could have remained as an independent, which I think would have made her actually a stronger political figure. But, you know, this is somebody who's very, very bright and who has experience as a senior military officer. Well, relatively senior. She's a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. And, you know, ODNI, I mean, really, what does ODNI do? They handle the budget. It's all about the budget. She's not going to be making intelligence policy. She's going to be making sure that the budget is passed and is appropriated for all of the 18 different intelligence services. Ratcliffe is more important in the day-to-day operations, and I know that his mandate is to, you know, shake things up, you know, deep state and all that stuff, and take the place apart. He's going to have a very difficult time doing that because CIA is unique, not solely unique, but it's unique among most governmental organizations in that there are no Schedule C officials there, Schedule C political appointees. The only political appointee is the director. Everybody else is career.
Yeah.
And so if the director comes in and says, you know, I'm going to shake this place up, they say, yeah, good luck.
He's the new guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck, new guy. Yeah. We've been here
Young
35
blood.
years.
Yeah.
We've seen 8, 9, 10 directors come and go. Good luck with that. And that's what worries me.
Speaking of bomb throwers, I found myself actually last night hanging out with some of crypto's most anarchist personalities. I happened to be in a city where there was a meetup, and it just one thing led to another. How much do you think the CIA keeps an eye on crypto? Just out of curiosity, and maybe even did they invent crypto? Is a question I have.
Well, a lot of people have asked if the CIA invented crypto. I think probably not, but I think probably in opposition to everybody else in government, and especially the departments of Treasury and Justice, I think they probably loved the idea of crypto when it first took hold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
More
because
tracking, free tracking.
yeah, exactly. The CIA doesn't give a shit about money laundering.
Right.
They don't. That's Treasury's problem and DOJ. The CIA is probably laundering money right now as we speak. So I think they probably thought,
imagine.
hey, here's a cool new tool. We can make something out of this.
Well, and that'd be one part of the budget is there's got to be a lot of laundering operations that are sources of income for certain aspects of the CIA. How much do you think of
Absolutely.
that would even account for total funding? I mean, it would just be a pure guess, I imagine.
Probably not a lot. I think that it would go the other way, where the CIA is going to have to come up with novel ways of paying sources or of financing operations. When I was in the CIA, and I left 20 years ago, intelligence was a cash business, right? You go meet with sources, you have pockets full of cash. In some cases, you have duffel bags full of cash,
Right.
and you pay everybody in cash. You can't do that anymore, right? First of all, nobody uses cash. We do in the United States a little bit, but I travel extensively overseas all the time. Nobody uses cash anymore. And so you got to pay for operations. You got to pay your agent's salaries. How do you do that? In extreme cases, we used to do it like, you know, in diamonds, or well, there were other ways I probably shouldn't get into, but there were different ways that you could do it. Now, what's better than Bitcoin?
Crypto.
It's the best.
Right.
Nobody's going to know about it. Nobody. It has to be liberating if you're a case officer in the field working with somebody who needs to be paid every month.
And you can just Bitcoin. You can just send them a transaction. Yeah. Right.
Just do it on your classified phone, your tempested phone. Nobody's the wiser.
But they would
So-
probably, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
This kind of brings back to the question of who is the CIA, because we went over there's the 4 directorates
Yeah.
And so how are they all operating? Are they all siloed? Do they all kind of just, is it very secretive and
Good question.
how quickly does it break up? Is there just 1,000 bubbles and no bubble knows what other bubbles are doing but the top bubbles? Or is it
In most cases, yes.
okay, it's very siloed.
It's
little
not
pockets.
as siloed. It's not as siloed as it was pre 9/11. Pre 9/11, it's kind of funny. When I first joined the CIA, staff members have blue badges, contractors have green badges, and then there's yellow badge, which means you only have a secret clearance, and a red badge means you're not allowed in vaulted spaces. So the blue badges had letters on them, and mine had a letter H. H means top secret SITK gamma clearances. It's the highest normal clearance without compartments.
Okay.
But that also meant that I was not allowed on the 6th floor, because the 6th floor was where all the operational offices were. And they had checkpoints in the hallways where, contractors would just sit there at this podium. And as you walk past, you had to hold up your badge inside the CIA. You have to go take a piss and you have to hold up your badge and, to get to the men's room. That changed in the early 1990s. It's silly. We all have top secret SITK gamma clearances. What are we doing here? Mm-hmm. And so they created these centers. There was the Counterterrorism Center, the Counter Narcotics Center, the Counterproliferation Center, the Counterintelligence Center, where they brought officers from the DO and the DI together to share information. That had never been done before. Wow. Normally, analysts, for example, were forbidden from seeing any operational cable traffic.
Because it would bias their analyses?
No, because the operations people had to protect the identity of the source.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Even from their own people.
Even from their own. So no, it prevents fewer potentially compromising individuals.
Even among my own DO colleagues, we would never use sources' names. I would say, hey, that was a great piece you wrote on AB Grasshopper. And my colleague would say, oh, I loved the report of your meeting with, BC Lamppost. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't have a need to know the name of his source. He didn't have a need to know the name of my source. So everything was done in code, but then the DI was completely cut off from that. So in the 90s, they started bringing them in on these big overarching issues. Post 9/11, everybody's co-located. You're sitting next to each other. Everybody's reading everybody else's traffic. And it actually worked.
Okay. It was better to be more efficient. It was worth the downside.
It is. It's much more efficient. But again, with that said, there are hundreds of compartments within the top secret SITK gamma clearance. So, for example, when I was the executive assistant to the CIA's deputy director for operations, I had clearances for all, not every compartment, but for related to terrorism, Iraq, the rest of the Middle East, for 6 or 8 compartments. And I'll give you an example. We got a very sensitive cable in one day that involved a life-threatening situation. And so every morning I had to brief the director, the deputy director, and all of the associate deputy directors and their staff members. So we're in the director's conference room, and I said, finally, there's a cable that came in the Rockstar compartment that I think you should know about. And the deputy director said, wait a minute, don't brief that. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And then he said, all the associate deputy directors, I'm sorry, you have to step out. And I was like, holy shit, I'm cleared. And the associate deputy directors for operations are not cleared for the information. Wow. They all had to leave. And I briefed it to the director.
Yeah. Were you only clear?
Yeah. Who decides who's clear? Is there any source of truth? Any one person or one department that's kind of give him clearance, don't give them clearance. Because now I know who has clearance or doesn't have clearance. Like,
Yeah.
or is it
Only the director is cleared for everything.
only the director?
Literally only the director. So
And they're appointed. They're the one appointed official.
and they're the only one who's appointed.
Yeah.
Yes.
These
That's right.
clearances do not go across departments like the DIA, the CIA, the Department of Energy.
No.
They all have their own clearance systems. Is that right?
Well, there's an overall clearance system. There are different investigative organizations. Like, for example, the CIA does its own investigations, background investigations. The FBI does its own background investigations. Pentagon does its own background investigations. And then the Office of Personnel Management does all of the rest of government.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get, top secret, secret, confidential. And then within top secret, you get special intelligence, SI, and then extra compartments, talent, keyhole, gamma. And that gives you access to like 99% of everything that's coming in from around the world.
Okay. Do you guys ever have interactions with the DIA or any other intelligence?
Only to insult each other.
Okay.
I mean, listen, DIA is, the way we always looked at DIA was, that was all the people who either failed the CIA polygraph or were too stupid to get hired by the CIA.
Maybe Alex Jones works for the DIA. Would you hold that opinion?
The truth is DIA does order of battle analysis, which honestly, in my many years in government, I never encountered anything more boring and less relevant to what it was that I was doing than order of battle.
Okay.
I would sit through these order of battle briefings from DIA like, you have got to be kidding me. Well, elements of the 1st Brigade are at this location, and then 3 units of the 4th Division of mountain horses are in this. I don't care where I don't even know what that stuff means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been following the UFO hearings going?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where, if you had to speculate, where would the UFOs be stored? Would it be more likely in the CIA, the Department of
No.
Energy? Where
No.
would that be?
It was always my understanding that was completely a DOD issue.
Okay.
Yeah. We used to actually chuckle at the CIA because we would see these documentaries on the Discovery Channel and the Nat Geo channel, and like everybody does. And they're like, this guy very authoritatively says, the alien bodies are, they're in the basement at Langley. And we used to like laugh, like, dude, the only things in the basement at Langley are the gym, the boiler room, and the supply room. There are no alien bodies down there.
That's what they would have you think, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Do you have any thoughts on aliens? I mean, just personally?
I do. I even did an episode of this on my former TV show. If you have a minute for an anecdote,
Yeah.
when I was 17 years old, my mom and dad owned a restaurant in Sharon, Pennsylvania, and we lived in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which was about 20 miles away. 20 miles separated by Amish country. And that's important because the Amish don't use electricity. And so it's very, very dark going from one town to the other.
Sure.
And so I worked midnight shift with my dad at the restaurant on weekends. So we left our house. We were working from 11 to 7. And we left our house at 10 o'clock. It's a 20-minute drive. And we're going through Amish country. And we see this brilliant flash of white light, like blinding flash of white light. And we both looked up, and then there was a second flash and then a third flash. And he said, "What is that?"
How big, like relatively speaking to other objects you'd see in the sky, how big was this flash?
It was not terribly high. I would say it was probably 1,000 or 2,000 feet.
Oh, low, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then this orange trapezoid just lit up, and it was hovering there. And he pulled over, and we got out of the car, and we're just standing there looking at this thing. And he goes, "What is that?" And the guy pulls up behind us, and he gets out of his car, and he goes, "What the heck is that?" I said, "We don't know." And we're looking at it, and then it goes whoosh, like at this fantastic speed. And it was just gone. We got back in the car. We start driving to the restaurant. And I said, should we call somebody? Should we like call the cops or something? And he said, yeah, he said, to say what? We saw a flying saucer and it flew away. And I said, yeah, you're right. I'll never forget it. I can't explain it. On my TV show, I had a Harvard physicist, a professor from Harvard named Avi Loeb. Avi Loeb. And Avi's not ashamed or embarrassed to lay his findings right out there. So he led an expedition, an undersea expedition off the coast of Papua New Guinea a couple of years ago. And he was able to retrieve 32 little bits of metal about the size of BBs, the composition of which does not come from this planet. He said they've run these BBs through every test, and they are not alloys known to exist on Earth. So he has speculated that they are either remnants of a very unusual deep space object, some kind of a meteor that science has never seen before, or they're pieces of a ship, and that the alloys were actually finished alloys that were used as part of a ship. So who knows? You know, my uncle also owned a restaurant here in Alexandria, Virginia, close in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. And a lot of guys from the Pentagon used to come and have lunch. And I remember one of the guys sitting at a bar saying that he was a fighter pilot. He was an F-14 pilot. So this is back in the day, back in the 80s. And he said he had seen something that so shook him up, he couldn't get it out of his head. He said he watched this flying ship of some sort dive into the ocean, and then about 10 seconds later, shoot straight up out of the ocean. He said he had never seen anything like it before, never saw anything like it again, and just couldn't get it out of his head. So something's going on. I'm not sure that the Pentagon has answers, but there's got to be something out there.
Is it? I mean, what do you think about the idea of you know, maybe it was crashed technology and the U.S. government recovers it, and then reverse engineers it, and like, is that some dark military something ship doing a test run, or is it actually extraterrestrials? Do both of those seem plausible to you?
I think both are plausible. Yeah. I can't imagine with the trillions of stars that are known to exist that there's not a planet around one of them that developed far, far earlier than we did, that, you know, that wouldn't have technology to be out there exploring. And then at the same time, if we take at face value what happened in New Mexico in the 1950s, yeah, I mean, I would want my government to be reverse engineering something that it found like that.
That's right.
Well, that's
What can the CIA not do? Like again, going back to what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do, are they allowed to go assassinate somebody that's not an American? Are they allowed
Now they are.
Yeah, like, are they allowed to assassinate Americans? Are they allowed, or you know, I don't know. I don't know where their limits are. Where do they get orders? And then, like, it just is a black box. So, like,
it is.
Who's throwing stuff into the black box, and what can that black box do and not do?
Yeah. Well, Executive Order 12333, signed by President Ford, outlawed assassinations by the CIA. President George W. Bush revoked that a few days after 9/11. So the CIA, through something called the Special Activities Division, started going around the world killing people. People who posed
at their discretion. At their discretion.
At their discretion, with the approval of either the director or the deputy director of the National Security Council. If somebody posed a clear and present danger to the safety of Americans or to American facilities, they could legally be assassinated. And so many people have. Now, you're probably aware of a conversation, more than a conversation, a congressional hearing where Eric Holder was asked by Senator Rand Paul whether the National Defense Authorization Act authorized the President of the United States to assassinate or to order the assassination of American citizens without benefit of trial. The answer is yes. Now, we don't know that that's been done. We know that besides Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the spokesman of al-Qaeda and an American citizen, he's the one that we're all aware of. 7 days later, his son and his nephew were killed sitting at a cafe in a village in Yemen, also through a drone strike. And then we said, oh, our bad, that was an accident. That was overseas. But Eric Holder said that if the president wants to kill an American citizen who has never been charged with a crime on American soil, theoretically, he has the legal right to do that. Yeah. Now, one thing that the CIA is forbidden from doing is from spying on American citizens.
Okay.
And so, in my own experience, and this happened twice in my career, we were going after a target. We discovered it was an American, and we stopped immediately and turned the whole case over to the FBI.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that goes to the FBI is American citizens.
Correct.
Who do you think would have more insight in American citizens' personal life between the NSA and the FBI?
Oh, well, NSA, clearly NSA.
Okay.
Because the FBI is made up of, men and women, and NSA is made up of the most powerful computers and satellites and AI known to exist, to mankind.
Gray supercomputers and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I say this all the time, and I don't mean this as any kind of compliment to NSA. First of all, not only is it illegal for NSA to collect the communications of American citizens, it's a part of NSA's charter that they may not collect on American citizens. Well, now they collect on every American citizen, right? Every phone call, every text message, every email from everybody in the world is collected and stored to the point where NSA had to build a new storage facility in the Utah desert that has enough memory to store all that data for 500 years.
Okay. I heard Tucker Carlson say that his signal got hacked. And I had professors that worked for sort of the military industrial complex when I was in university, and they always told me that it's at least 50 years ahead of whatever we've heard about, which to me means probably they're ahead in quantum computing because we've seen that one coming
Yes.
for a long time. And it makes me wonder if they've probably already broken encryption. And I wonder, maybe, Tucker, they didn't have to have a mole inside of Signal. Maybe they just can break encryption if they're storing all traffic, like what you're saying.
Well, we know that the Israelis can certainly break encryption. We can too, but the Israelis can do it more quickly than we do. And oftentimes the FBI will contract it out to the Israelis, and then the Israelis do it for us.
What? How does that? Is that just? Do they keep the information? I mean, how do you?
They're Israelis. You bet they keep the
Yeah,
information.
Oh my
and we're
God.
good with it. Like, it's actually a worthwhile trade to give them the information just so we can also get the information.
Isn't that nuts?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Signal, I always just assumed that Signal had a back door.
Yeah.
And I also assumed you can't really trust any of the encrypted apps. Either they've got CIA people or NSA people inside, or they were part of the design and they engineered a backdoor anyway. Tom Drake, the former NSA whistleblower, told me that NSA also has technology to intercept your Signal messages before you hit the send button, because it's when you hit the send button that it encrypts it. So they'll get it as you're typing it before you hit send.
They might be taking screenshots or who knows what.
Exactly. So it doesn't even need to be
In which case it wouldn't matter.
cracked.
So how do you
Exactly.
communicate with people, or do you just not do any?
Does it not matter?
Well, you know what? I always defer to the people who want to talk to me. So I use Signal. I use WhatsApp. I also use Viber a lot. Viber is very popular in Europe, and it was a couple of years ago. It was purchased by a Chinese company. And to tell you the truth, I'm far less worried about the Chinese intercepting my communications than I am about the Americans.
Wow.
I was going to ask about Telegram because that just happened,
Yeah.
with France because it's Russian, and
It's
sometimes
Russian.
it's like, wait, I almost want to pick who I want to give my information to and never give all
Exactly.
of them all the information. I don't care if Russia knows that about me, and I don't care if the US knows that about me, but none of them can, they're not going to
Exactly.
share.
I have the
So,
same conversation with myself. Yes.
yeah. I'm just asking, who would I be okay reading this? And if it's Russia, cool, because they're not going to do anything with it. Or if it's America, cool, they're not going to, and you just pick and choose who you want
Right.
to read your messages.
The
I
crypto
have the
peop-
same thoughts.
the crypto people seem to use Simple X. I don't know if you've ever used that.
I
It's a
haven't
little
used that.
it's a little
Yeah.
slower because I think it's more of like a torrent type technology. So you have to
Right.
sync the nodes and everything. So sometimes your messages take a while, but they seem to believe it's the best. So that's where I'm leaning now, but it'll probably change in like a week.
Oh, it probably will. Yeah.
Oh,
You might
fantastic.
remember a terrorist attack a few years ago in San Bernardino, California, where the shooter was communicating with other members of a cell through a video game. This is something we also saw on the TV series Fauda, where the Mossad, or they weren't Mossad, they were Shin Bet. The Shin Bet guys were communicating through an online backgammon game, right? And so nobody thinks to try to hack into,
Yep.
Wii or Sega or whatever. And
Yeah.
so the FBI just totally missed everything. So they confiscated the guy's phone after he was killed in the shootout. They confiscated his phone. It was an iPhone, and Apple, to their credit, said, "We're not letting you into the phone, right? Not unless there's a court order, there's a warrant for it. We're not doing it." So the FBI couldn't crack it. So they sent it to the Israelis, and the Israelis cracked it in about 2 weeks. And I remember, not Robert Mueller, the tall one that got fired, that Trump fired. Anyway, I remember him laughing in response to a reporter's question, saying, "What that cost me would make your hair stand up." And a Freedom of Information Act request later revealed that the FBI paid this private Israeli company $6 million to crack the encryption on the iPhone, and they did it.
That's
No way.
crazy.
Yeah.
What's the difference between Shin Bet and Mossad? I've heard you talk about
Oh,
Shin Bet
yeah.
before.
Yeah, Shin Bet is the Israeli version of the FBI, and Mossad is the Israeli version of the CIA. It's like MI5 in the UK is the domestic security, and MI6 is foreign intelligence.
Can you speak to levels of competence between the two countries' agencies?
Yeah, the Israelis are probably the best in the world.
Really?
Yeah, they really are, and they are absolutely ruthless, brutal.
Why? Why do you think they're the best in the world? What is it about it that makes them?
Their technology is cutting edge. They have nowhere near the bureaucracy that we have. And we used to say that about the Brits. I remember when I was a junior person, one of the senior guys talking about how much he respected MI6, because he said, if we want to come up with an operation to target Hezbollah, it's going to take us 6 months to get through the approval process and then the budget process. They have to brief the operation to the congressional oversight committees. He said the Brits come up with the same idea. They implement it in a week. They send a couple officers out. They do whatever it is they're supposed to do, and it's done. They don't have the bureaucracy that we do.
So it's a speed thing.
I think it's a speed thing. There are other intelligence organizations too that are good in different areas. The Chinese, when it comes to tech, wow. The Chinese, the Israelis, the North Koreans, amazing. When it comes to security, the Israelis, they're the best in the world. The US is good. The Brits are good. And when it comes to things like counterterrorism, for example, the Jordanians and the Egyptians, among the best in the world.
Really?
I'm proud to have worked alongside the Jordanians and the Egyptians. Those guys are 100% pro.
What's the difference?
I've heard you mention that the Jordanians has the Jordanian royal family, and then the people are sort of totally separate. Is this connected more to the royal family or to the Jordanian people?
It was in the beginning because, well, in 1968 there was an uprising against the Jordanian royal family. It was initiated by a group called Black September. They were the ones that later murdered every member of the Israeli Olympic team in Munich in
Mm,
1972.
yeah.
They were literally fighting on the steps of the royal palace when the palace guard finally turned it and defeated them. That's how close the Jordanian royal family came to being
Wow.
overthrown in 1968. And an ongoing problem for the Jordanian royal family, really the whole Jordanian government, is fully 50% of the population of Jordan is Palestinian.
Oh,
They're
wow.
they went into Jordan in 1947 when the Israelis, declared the creation of the state of Israel. Everybody thought they'd be there for, a couple of months and then retake Palestine. It never happened. Now we're talking, fourth generation, fifth
Yeah.
generation of
Yep.
people living in refugee camps in Jordan who've never been granted Jordanian citizenship. And even with passports, Jordanian passports are black. If you're a Palestinian who lives in Jordan, your passport's green. So you can't get to vote. You don't have the same political rights or legal rights that Jordanian citizens have. You're always going to be a second-class citizen. Even if you're born there, your parents are born there, and your grandparents are born there. They don't care. So the royal family understands that this is going to be an ongoing problem. When you treat people like second-class citizens, Martin Luther King said, never underestimate a man's desire to be free. And so people are going to get pissed off eventually. And
Yes,
so you
sir.
need a really great internal and external security service to make sure that they remain in their box.
How many of the world leaders from that part of the world did you come in direct contact with?
Oh, all of them.
Wow.
Yeah. All of
So,
them over the years.
well, that
Now,
that leads me.
I was mostly a note taker in meetings with more important people,
Okay.
but yeah, all of them.
That leads me to a question. I was talking with my dad about this last night, and I said, if John has all of these connections, it'd be so hard to replace because the relationships he would have built over time. And then that leads me to the question, which a lot of the crypto people were asking me, which was once CIA, always CIA.
No,
How do you
that is
respond to
so intellectually lazy. I fucking hate when people say that. And usually, like, some malcontent throws that at me at an
Yep.
event. And I always say, okay, I'll tell Ed Snowden and Ray McGovern that
not to
you
cooperate?
think that they're still CIA, you fucking moron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got
It's
to hear you
just so
say that.
intellectually lazy. I
Yeah.
just, I hate it. My contacts were not unique inside the
Okay.
CIA. Everybody who had the kind of career that I had has experiences like that. And in addition, like, I get text messages from the Crown Prince of Bahrain all the time, only because we went to college together. And
Alright.
then I served in Bahrain for 2 years and we were, inseparable. And so we still, I shouldn't say what we text about. We text
He
about,
sends you a bunch of memes. Just be honest. It's you
he
got a
actually
meme
does.
thread going on.
Yeah, he does
Yeah.
actually send memes. There's one country in particular that he criticizes a lot. It doesn't take an Einstein to figure out what it is, but yeah, you make these friendships. I was invited to the Crown Prince of Kuwait's wedding, and I went to his wedding. So you develop these friendships, and they,
Yeah, because people are still people. And
yeah, people are still people. Exactly.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, are people still people? I mean, I know that's true sometimes. How many are like, no, you know what I mean? Like
How
many are
principled are a lot of people in the CIA? Because yeah, I feel like it depends on how principled you are. If you can separate your work and your life balance.
Honestly, it depends where in the CIA you're working. So if you're in the counterterrorism center, no, they actually don't want principled people there. They want people who are going to carry out the mission. Whether or
Okay.
not you have legal or ethical problems with it, you're just going to keep your mouth shut and carry out the mission.
Yeah.
Everywhere else in the CIA, most everywhere else, sure, you do have principled people. But people who believe that we're the good guys. And
That's
so
right.
at the end of the day, if the rules were fudged or maybe you crossed a legal line, well, we're the good guys. So live with it.
That's the reasoning.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, that would be the reasoning as well. We're the ones bringing freedom and peace to the world, and
exactly.
it's justifiable.
Exactly.
There's a burning question I have to ask you before we go for sure. Ever since I was little and I saw the towers fall, I saw the third tower fall,
Yeah.
and then later in my teens, I went and researched all these architects that signed this petition and they wanted information about it. And basically, everybody seems to say online, especially on Twitter, where I spend my time, that there were three controlled demolitions. And I've heard you say that they're not controlled demolitions, and I just want to hear you talk about that if you can.
Yeah, listen, in your comment section, once you post this, people are going to shit all over me on
That's
this.
all right. We don't.
But I have never believed in the controlled demolition theory. We don't need to destroy our own buildings to justify a war.
Mm.
9/11 was an act of terror committed by Al Qaeda. Period. It wasn't the Bush family. It wasn't the Saudi royal family. It wasn't the Jews. It was Al Qaeda. It was Al Qaeda, and I've seen the lists of engineers. I've seen the petitions, and they make a compelling case. But there are even more engineers who say, look, those buildings were mostly aluminum because they were so big, they needed something lightweight. And like an aluminum can, if you push down on the top of it, nothing happens. If you put a little chink in the side, it's going to collapse.
Oh, I
And
see.
I think that's what happened.
And Building 7, how do you talk about Building
Well,
7?
people forget that Building 7 had this massive store of fuel several floors beneath it. It was the NYPD's emergency operations center, and they had this gigantic store of fuel. And the building, the towers 1 and 2 coming down was like an earthquake. And so it weakened Building 7. Building 7 came down on top of its own fuel source. And that, destroyed the whole area.
Wow. I'm not convinced, just because of the rate of falling at gravity that I've seen so many times, but I didn't know about the fuel store, so I'm gonna have to go back and
And that's okay.
rethink this. Yeah.
Jesse Ventura and I disagree about this all the time. We love each other. He's an
Yeah.
absolutely awesome guy.
Yeah.
And he's been kind to me for years. But his position is that the building's interior was painted with what he calls nanothermite paint,
Okay.
explosive paint. And I tell him all the time, Governor, with all due respect, there is no such thing as nanothermite paint. That's just made up. Like you can't go to the Home Depot and buy nanothermite paint.
Well, it would have to
Yep.
come out of that technology budget at the
Right.
under the Directorate of Technology. Yeah.
Right. And people say, well, we needed to bring down the towers ourselves to justify a war in the Middle East. No.
Yeah.
If we want to invade a country, we just invade it. I mean, look at through American history. You don't need to destroy your own stuff and kill 3,000 people. You just do it.
Do you think that it's also a middle ground there where you kind of uncover a plot and then you kind of just don't do anything to stop it in a way? So it's almost like, you could stop it, but you're like, but if we don't, then we get justification. So we literally go, we didn't do it.
But you're assuming that our government is run by intelligent people who can keep
Right.
that many balls in the air. And after 20
go around.
20 years in government, people aren't really that smart. And there are so many moving parts to a conspiracy and so many people that need to be involved. It's virtually impossible to keep it secret. You just can't keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too many
Well,
people.
of the public figures, congressmen, governors, things that are currently in office, is there anyone that you feel really represents the values that you would like for them to represent for our country?
What a good question that is. Yeah, there are a couple. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. I wish he were more bold than he is, but he really is one of the good guys
Okay.
on Capitol Hill. He really is. Another one on the Republican side is Congressman Thomas Massey of
Yeah.
Kentucky. I have deep respect for Massey. There are several Republicans I have a great deal of respect for. Another one is Gus Bilirakis from Florida.
Mm.
Gus is a genuinely good guy who genuinely loves his country and wants to do the right thing. And you don't see that a lot. Listen,
Yeah.
I served both on the House side and on the Senate side. Most recently on the Senate side, I was the chief investigator in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And most of these guys and women seek only to promote their own narcissism and to cash in. It's not about the country. It's about power, and it's about enriching themselves. But Wyden he has done yeoman's work on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Bilirakis and Massey. You know, I've been to a couple of baseball games with Massey. My best friend he's a former deputy attorney general of the United States, and he's a great baseball fan. His dad, back in the 50s, was a third baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So we go to a lot of ball games together, and he writes a lot of legislation for Massey. So Massey has come to a couple of the games. He's just an awesome guy. We disagree on a lot of political issues, certainly,
Sure.
but he's in it because he loves the country and wants to do the right thing.
Oh, that's cool to hear. I have a friend who's actually a friend with Wyden's son, and I think he runs a hedge fund out in New York now. And
No
so,
kidding. And you know, Wyden's wife owns the Strand bookstore in New York.
oh, no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
That's interesting how there's so many New York connections from Oregon. That's interesting.
Yeah, good
Um,
guy.
I have kind of a higher level question. What it's sort of it's very theoretical and speculative, but on the topic of the huge topic of world peace, I kind of am like, what are we fighting over? What is the
I
like,
know, right?
what you I mean, MI5, MI6, you got the Israeli, like it seems like all the countries have, or anyone's with resources
Yeah.
have these agencies, and everyone's spying on each other,
Yes.
and everyone's trying to have more info than everyone else. And I know that's happening to some degrees in different areas, but then but they want to use it to just get money, get power, just
Oh
win.
man,
Like
it's
what are we doing?
Yes and
what are
yes.
we doing with all of this? Why are we what do we do? I don't get it. I don't
Yeah.
understand why you can't just put everybody in a room and go, "Hey, we got to sort this out," instead of just like doing this all the time. Do you know, it's sort of a vague question, but
Well, no, it's
what's the
not vague. But the problem is that you're thinking like a logical person, and you can't
Well,
think like a logical person. You have to think
yeah.
like a somebody who's trying to expand his kingdom. There's kind of a famous story that between 1920 and 1972, when J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI, all those years, he never had a budget decrease, ever. Never. Because every year he would go to Capitol Hill and he would say, communism. And they're like, oh my God, we got to raise the budget.
Give them everything.
Communism. Well, the CIA is the same thing. You don't want to be the director known as the guy who had his budget cut,
Yeah, right.
even though Bill Clinton did briefly cut the budget in the early 1990s because, things were actually going really well and the Soviet Union had fallen and it was the so-called peace dividend that lasted for a year or two. But 9/11,
Oh man.
I've told this story on podcasts before, but I went to Cofer Black, the director of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, about a week after 9/11. I bumped into him because you can imagine he's the busiest man in America at this point.
Yeah.
And I said, Cofer, do you have 1 minute?
Yeah.
I have an idea for an operation that I wanted to put past you. And he put up his hands. He goes, listen, whatever it is, just do it. I have so much money, I can't possibly spend it all. I said, okay,
Wow.
thank you. And then I went and spent $100,000 on an operation.
What so is it just pride? It's not like, or can they get billions of dollars of budget, and there's in some other countries, maybe you get billions of dollars and they siphon a little bit off and they keep a little bit for themselves and they get a Swiss bank account. And
Mhm.
I would imagine at least like you're doing it for money. But like, if you're not even
Right.
getting money, you're just doing it
Yeah.
because you like it. You just want to have a big budget with a bunch of people that report to you. That's
In
the
part,
reason
yes.
to
Yeah.
carry out terrorism, or
Yeah.
whatever. All the activities and everything is just so you can be important.
Well, in the halls at the CIA, they call it kingdom building, right? You're the king of your kingdom, and you
That's
want that kingdom to
insane.
be bigger and bigger and bigger. And don't forget that, listen, the CIA is like a Fortune 500 company in that the leadership is made up of sociopaths, people
Yeah.
who have climbed to the top of the ladder on the backs of those around them.
That's right.
And so, yeah, for them, it's all about the power. Every former CIA director sees himself as either a $10 million a year hedge fund guy once this is over, or the next Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State. And so this is a temporary stop for most of these people.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a career path.
Yes,
Well, a question I have for you. You seem to hold a lot of conflicting thoughts in your head, and I've
I
seen
do.
you talk. Yeah, you have a great ability to take different perspectives and handle them, and even weird questions. Do you have like a meditation practice, or how do you?
Ah,
I,
you're the second person that's asked me that just in the last few weeks. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I don't. And this is something my brother yells at me about all the time because he meditates and he says it's so incredibly beneficial and helpful and relaxing. And I don't. I don't really have a way to calm my thoughts.
yeah, maybe you
I,
don't
I
need to. Maybe you're born ready to go.
I don't
You know?
drink. I don't smoke. I don't smoke weed. I just kind of roll with it.
Oh, that's cool. Well,
I
and
also am very good at dealing with stress. At the CIA, you're under constant psychological or psychiatric observation, right? There's a
Mhm.
gigantic office within the Office of Medical Services that just certifies operations officers for service overseas. And you have to be sane, right? And stable. When I came back from Pakistan, one of the shrinks said to me, "It's incredible to me that you don't have PTSD." And I said, "Nah." I said, "I loved it there." And he said, but they were actively trying to kill you." And I said, "Yeah, but they failed.
how
What
do
else do you
you?
say?"
What-
I've got a
Thoughts.
question
Totally.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I'm single and I don't have any kids. Matt has crossed that bridge already. You've crossed that bridge already. What um being a public figure as you are and having a family and having something that I would guess is the most important to you outside of all the stuff that we ever talk about. How do you balance that in your life? What does that look like for you? And is fatherhood scarier than anything else you've ever done? Out of curiosity, as someone who isn't
Yeah.
a father yet.
The stakes are far, far higher um, as a father than they are in anything I ever did at the CIA. It's,
Mm.
and that's why I resigned from the CIA. I got divorced in 2000. My sons at the time were 7 and 4, and they needed their dad around. And so I was able to get back to back domestic assignments, one as the executive assistant, I told you, and then one at the United Nations. And I was flying back to Ohio every other weekend
Mm.
or driving back to Ohio every other weekend. And then it came time where, we've got 2 wars going and I'm senior enough that I really, really need to go overseas. And they offered me 2 station chief positions at smallish stations or one a deputy station chief position in an enormous station.
Mm.
And I thought, you know what, I can't leave my kids at this young impressionable age. And so I resigned. So yeah, most CIA people, I'll tell you, there was one precipitating incident. That wasn't an incident, but event that made me decide to resign. I was stationed at the UN. I had to go back to headquarters for consultations. So I go to the elevator, and next to the elevator, there was a flyer taped to the wall. And it was offering a class called Raising Your Children in a War Zone. And I
Wow.
thought, I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not
right.
doing this.
They're getting in front of it.
Yeah.
They're they're getting in front of it with the little tabs. You can get in front of it even before that by
Yeah.
not even being a part of it.
Yeah, I'm not doing this. And another thing too, when I was at the UN, we literally ran out of people to send to Iraq. And man, I had done my time. I was in Pakistan, I was in Afghanistan, I was in Iraq, I was in Yemen. I did my thing. And they're like, everybody's got to either volunteer or be subject to directed assignments. Directed assignment means they come in and say, you go to the airport, you're going to Baghdad. And I said, this is bullshit. I said, but I'm a patriot. And so I volunteered. I volunteered to go to Iraq. And before my number came up, I saw that sign and I
Mm,
quit.
Wow.
Sam.
Speaking of sending people over into war zones, I did want to ask you, because you have so much knowledge on the history of the CIA and what CIA's gone through, what are maybe like one or two of the biggest blunders and one or two of the biggest successes that you feel the CIA has been involved with?
Well, 9/11 is the worst intelligence failure in American history. There's no way to sugarcoat it. They were asleep at the switch. Even if George Tenet was trying to warn the White House in advance of the attacks, we had literally zero sources inside Al Qaeda. We had no idea where those attacks were going to come. And of course, now we know, thanks to the 9/11 Commission report and great investigative journalism, that the CIA knew that some of the hijackers were in the United States and didn't share it with the FBI. And the FBI knew that others of the hijackers were in the United States and didn't share it with the CIA. So
Okay.
it's unusual for a CIA blunder to result in the death of somebody, but the deaths of, what was it, 3,000 people in one
Yeah.
day? Come on. That's the worst intelligence failure in American history. Um, there's kind of an ongoing problem too, is that analytically, the CIA has missed almost every major world event analytically, right? Everything from the construction of the Berlin Wall to the Suez Crisis to the Six-Day War to, the fall of the Soviet Union. They've just missed it.
Yeah.
You've got the smartest people in America who went to the best schools in America, and they're so stovepiped and so thinking inside the box that they miss every single major global event. That's not acceptable.
Do you think it's possible to know that? Do you think it's actually possible to know every event
Yeah, if it's a
preemptively?
complex system.
Yeah, they're just so complex. How can
Yes, but if
it's cat and mouse and
but if you have access to all source intelligence, you're getting it from not just CIA, you're getting it from the State Department and the media and the Defense Department and NSA and foreign intelligence services. You should be able to say, hey, something happened in, let's say, something happened in Russia. We're detecting a change, or the Soviet Union. So we're detecting a change in the Soviet Union. And we think what this change means is, number one, nothing. Number two, the government could collapse. Number three, the Soviet Union could just break up into pieces. Number four, the Chinese could invade. You should be able to at least come up with different scenarios.
Yep.
I'll give you another example.
Got it.
When the Ayatollah Khomeini was very old, a colleague of mine wrote a paper saying Ayatollah Khomeini is probably going to die within the next 12 months, which was true. He did. And these 6 people are the likely successors. And this is what we expect to see. Okay, the name Ayatollah Khamenei never appeared in that paper. Like, why? We're supposed to be the global experts on Iran. And you're reading this all source intelligence. And so when Ali Khamenei was named, supreme leader, the White House is like, well, who the hell is this guy? And then we had to scramble to figure out who he was.
So you're making a case that the CIA is actually underfunded. That's where we're going out.
No, I think it's overfunded. Yeah, it's just not really as good at its job as it wants the American public to believe.
How can you be good at that job when there's so much need to know and isolation? I mean, I think the Fortune 500 public traded companies with public information, I think what's been evident over the last 50 years is that transparency and streamlining and scale and all of these buzzwords in the for-profit sector show how to do something right, but it feels like need to know and confidentiality are very much so at odds. And so how do you do that? Is there a way to actually do a good job while maintaining a lot of this secrecy?
Well, it's certainly a challenge to balance
Yeah.
these two aspects of it, and they haven't really quite figured out how to do it in a way that protects the sourcing and then at the same time gives the policymakers the best analysis that's possible.
I wonder if they could use AI for that. I wonder if you could
I suspect they very well could.
why not have an LLM in the middle where I feed this information to the LLM and the LLM feeds it over to this person with redaction, but then like there is sort of this source of truth that someone could go. I mean, really,
Well,
I think AI could really help with maintaining
Yeah.
secrecy while increasing transparency of communication, speed of
And-
communication.
And there's no downside to getting an opinion from AI. And then
Yeah.
you turn the opinion over to the analyst and say, what do you think of this?
That's right. They
Yeah.
should be
You know,
an analyst.
I-
It
I-
is an analyst. Yeah.
It's an analyst. I was asked once to serve on they called it a red team, right? A red team to look at security in the Persian Gulf. I had just come back from Bahrain, and there was a woman from DIA there, and she pulled me aside during a break, and it was to criticize me. And this is a woman who had never been to the Middle East before. And she criticized me, saying, I'm not thinking outside the box. And I said, on the contrary, you just make shit up. And that's not thinking outside the box. That's just making shit up.
Yeah.
And she backed off. Like, if you're going to come to an analytic judgment, you have to
Yeah.
do it based on the intelligence.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I have a. Oh, go ahead, Austin.
Well, you mentioned the media. I'm just curious, how involved is the CIA in mainstream media, do you think?
Very, very involved. I have a friend who works for Bloomberg named Jason Leopold. Jason Leopold is an absolutely outstanding investigative journalist. He's called the king of the Freedom of Information Act because he has filed more FOIA requests than anybody else in the world.
All right.
He's the one who broke the Hillary Clinton email story, and he did that
Okay.
through FOIA.
Oh, wow.
So a couple of years ago, he told me this. It's the funniest story. He said he was just bored one night and there was nothing really going on.
No way.
So he just filed a Freedom of Information Act request just for fun. And he sent it to the CIA and he asked for all communication between the CIA's Office of Public Affairs and all American journalists for this period of like 6 months. And they send him the information. What he found, two things that were very newsworthy. One was Ken Delanian, who is the chief national security correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, was writing articles and sending them to the CIA for clearance before sending them to his own editors.
No way.
Can you imagine how that guy is still employed
Yeah.
and making $2 million a year, whatever he makes?
Yeah.
It's a mystery to me.
It's
The other thing
disgrace to
that
our.
was, oh yeah, it's a disgrace. The other thing that was newsworthy was there was another journalist, I don't know who it was, who sent a very pointed question to the CIA saying, I'm working on this article and here's what I'm going to say. And the CIA responded, so help us, if you publish that article, you will never be invited to the Christmas party again, and we will never cooperate and never answer another question. And so he killed his own story.
Oh man.
No way.
So, back in the 70s, the CIA used to actively recruit American journalists to plant stories. That's illegal. They haven't done that since 1975, but they don't need to do that
Right.
because they exert this other influence
It's more
over the
efficient,
American media. In addition to that, the CIA has a dedicated branch inside the Office of Public Affairs whose job it is solely to work with Hollywood studios. So every
Wow.
movie and every TV show that comes out about intelligence is pro-CIA.
Wow. Now you worked on some films as well, but this was after you had left departed the CIA. Is that right?
Correct.
Was it fun? I was just curious, like, was that a
Oh
fun
my God.
experience for you?
So much fun.
It sounds
You know,
awesome.
it started it started by accident. I was on a plane flying to LA. For whatever reason, I got upgraded to first class. And so I'm sitting next to this guy, and I never talk to people on planes. I read or listen to whatever, to music.
Sure.
This guy next to me, blah, 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 he wouldn't stop. So he says, well, what do you do for a living? I said, oh, I'm the chief investigator at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And he said, oh, that sounds fascinating. I said, actually, no, it's terrible. It's boring. It's not important. Nobody listens to you. They don't care what you say. I said, but my previous job was interesting. I was in the CIA and counterterrorism, and I caught Abu Zubaydah and blah, blah, blah. He's like, holy shit. And he wanted to hear the story. So I said, well, what do you do for a living? And he said, oh, I created a TV show. I said, oh, really? Is it something I might have heard of? And he said, yeah, maybe. It's the #1 show on basic cable. It's called Burn Notice. And I said, oh my God. I said, that's my favorite show. I said, I've seen every episode. And in fact, I said, your tradecraft is so good. I've actually played the credits in slow motion to see who your advisor is.
Wow.
And he says, I don't have an advisor. I've been obsessed with the CIA since I was a little kid. I've read every book I can find on the CIA. So I created the show. He went to USC Film School and then created the show. By the time the plane landed, I was the script advisor.
No way.
Oh, no way.
Seriously, that was my start. So I advised on 6 episodes of season 6. He and I struck up a friendship. Matt Nix, the guy's a freaking genius when it comes to writing these things. And then he hired me as the script advisor for the CBS series True Lies, which was based on the Schwarzenegger movie. So I did the entire season, 12 or 13 episodes. But then, once word gets around that you do this kind of thing, I did The Kite Runner. I was the security advisor on The Kite Runner. And then that warranted a story in the New York Times. I did, Sacha Baron Cohen hired me for Bruno, and I went to Jordan.
No way.
I was the script advisor on Bruno. I did The Bourne Ultimatum. I did Kill the Messenger about Gary Webb. I was the script advisor there. I did an awful, awful movie. It was a John Travolta movie called From Paris with Love. Travolta's a great guy, but that movie was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. In fact, when the DVD was released, the Chicago Tribune did a review, and it said, the only highlight to this otherwise awful movie is an interesting interview with John Kiriakou in the bonus features. I still crack up when I think about it.
Great.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there. People call all the time. Hey, can you look at this script and tell us if CIA people really talk like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one question that I've been wanting to ask around. There's an organization called the Monroe Institute out of Charlottesville. Are you familiar with the Monroe Institute? And
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a man. How do we explain this?
Well, Bob Monroe was sort of a rich guy that had a company, and he had a weird out of body experience. So he devoted a whole division of his company to go study it. And then the CIA ended up contracting. This is a story, at least, for like 20 years or something like that.
Oh, I see. You're talking about remote
viewing. Yep.
viewing.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's the Gateway. The Gateway was the declassified CIA documents.
Yeah.
And I just was wondering if that ever crossed, because the CIA has so many bubbles and so many different things. Maybe there's nothing, but was it a normally known thing for you that you could call in a remote viewer to help you find somebody you're looking for, or like?
It was my understanding that ended in the 70s. I never encountered it in my career. I know that they spent millions of dollars trying to develop it, and that nothing came of it in the end.
Okay. And then is there a possible chance? Because what everybody would say is, sure, that's what they want you to say, but it works so well that now it's some sequestered off CIA office that's still running and everybody else doesn't know about that yet. Can that happen? Or is that just pure,
No.
if
Listen,
no kills it,
i-
everyone knows it's killed?
in the hallway, in the cafeteria,
That's right.
in the bar,
Yeah.
somebody's gonna say something, and the
Okay.
rumor gets around.
Locker
Yeah.
room talk. This is CIA
Right.
level locker room talk.
Exactly. Yeah, this is why the CIA has its own, for example, softball league, right? There are 8 teams. Everybody in the entire league is a CIA officer. So you're
Wow.
standing there on the sideline like this, and you're talking about highly classified, programs, and then it's your turn to bat.
The bat.
So that way, it's cool. There's an LGBTQ organization. There's a quilting club. There's a glee
Right.
club. There's a flag football league.
Got it.
Everything is internal. Everything, and
Wow.
that way you can talk to people and not risk security.
And so it would be in this specific instance, if there was still one little division that's trying to remote view and has these guys who are having assignments to find things through remote viewing, it feels like through all of the social things that happen inside the CIA, that would be a very hard thing to keep secret.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, what you would want to get from remote viewing is what targeting analysts do. And so
Right.
with the advent of targeting analysts in the 1990s, and the success, frankly, of targeting analysts post 9/11, you don't really need to waste your time and money with remote viewing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you can get it straight off the 3D plane. You don't have to go to the paranormal.
Yeah,
The directorate of the
Exactly.
paranormal. Yeah.
exactly. You give a skilled analyst, literally a million pieces of metadata.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll find your target in 2 weeks, and then you can just drop a bomb on him.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's almost more efficient with the info
Mhm.
that they have.
Yeah. Well, John, I know we're trying to save your voice. I know you got a lot of stuff coming up. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We're already running over a little bit. Matt, is there any last question that's burning? I
No,
think
I
I've
wanted
gotten
to
mine
I wanted to
out.
know about the Monroe Institute and the
Yeah.
CIA Gateway tapes. So the fact that you would say that there's definitely not a secret program running, because it would come out. It would come
It
out in
would
the
come out
softball
the
league.
grapevine.
So yeah, somebody in the grapevine would say, "Hey, I heard the coolest thing today,"
Yeah,
and then
so
you
they
say,
most likely dropped it. Okay.
Yeah,
Do
That's
you think that there has to be any spying on the CIA has to spy on CIA people to catch wind of what grapevine is happening?
absolutely yes,
Okay.
absolutely yes, and that's actually been leaked just within the last year. So
Okay.
the CIA was so burned by the Vault 7 revelations that they did a couple of things. Number one, they instituted a rewards program for CIA officers to rat out their colleagues who they think might be thinking about whistleblowing or leaking information or whatever. So you can report somebody, get a reward. Secondly, they've instituted the use of AI to predict what
Oh,
officers might be thinking about whistleblowing in order to catch them before they actually make a revelation.
Yeah. And if you're in the CIA, you got to give access to all of your electronics.
Everything.
They get everything. So then if I
Everything.
if I go to Walmart and I get a burner phone with cash and that's discovered on me, or they figure that out,
You're
I'm
toast.
gone. I'm
Yeah,
gone. Yeah. You're
without a
not in this.
doubt.
Yeah. Cause it's, what do you,
That's
yeah.
right.
Okay. Got it. So
Yeah.
they demand complete oversight over all of everything that you do electronically, certainly, and if not everything. And if you
That's
break
right.
that, you're out of here, buddy.
You're done. You're
Yeah.
done.
Most of these leaks that happen, do you find the documents on WikiLeaks or where do you find those? Just
That's a good question. After the relentless pursuit of Julian Assange over the course of 14 years, WikiLeaks is a shell of what it used to be.
Okay.
I mean, WikiLeaks is still out there, but for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really exist anymore.
okay.
Not compared to what it once was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are still a lot of leaks, but now you're finding them on like Discord or Telegram, or they go directly to a news outlet. Although news outlets now are very reluctant to publish anything. I mean, look at the Intercept. The Intercept was either directly or indirectly responsible for the arrest of 5 whistleblowers. 5. And they actively solicit classified information. They have an encryption key on the website. Well, why would you send classified information to the Intercept if the likelihood is that you're going to be arrested 2 hours later and charged with espionage?
Yeah.
Do you think that's on the Intercept, or do you think the Intercept's just being monitored?
100% it's on the Intercept. 100%. It's bad tradecraft, bad journalism.
If you needed to come out with a leak right now, which organization would you trust, if any?
I would still trust WikiLeaks.
Okay.
WikiLeaks is the only organization that's never either accidentally or otherwise outed a source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One project I was kind of working on was just trying to pull down all of the files that Snowden released and feed them to an LLM so you could sort of chat with them, so you could ask high-level questions, things like that.
Yeah.
Do you know any
That's a
projects
great idea.
that do that? Okay, cool.
Well, I sure
might
don't.
keep pursuing that then, yeah.
And you know, only a small fraction of the Snowden information has actually been released.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, right.
Less than 10%.
Where do you think I could find the most complete data set, out of curiosity?
It used to be at The Guardian.
Okay.
I think they took it down. The Washington Post never put it up in the first place. WikiLeaks might have something.
Okay.
I'm not sure that it actually exists publicly. Everybody was sort of expecting that Glenn Greenwald would put it all up, and he never did.
Okay, so Trump was talking to Rogan, and Rogan asked if he's gonna release the JFK files.
Right.
Is that in reference? Does the CIA have the JFK files, or does the
Yes, sir.
FBI have the JFK files?
The CIA has them. This is a topic that comes up all the time with the people that I that are in my circle. There are about 10 or 15,000 pages of the JFK files remaining to be released. Now, Trump promised to release them, and he didn't. Biden promised to release them, and he didn't. Congress mandated their release in legislation, and they were ignored. So I asked,
who's in charge around here?
Yeah, I know, right? So I asked an analyst from the National Security Archive, which houses these similar documents. It's based at George Washington University. I said, what do you think is in those documents? I said, I like to think that I'm pretty well educated on all the background, and I'm going to make an educated guess here and say, I think these documents contain information on CIA surveillance operations in Mexico City in 1963. And he said, I think that's exactly what they are. So I said, who gives a shit in 2024 who the CIA was surveilling in Mexico City in 1963? And he said, that's the mystery.
That's right.
Wow. Well, that is a big mystery.
Yeah.
And so Trump can't just walk into the CIA and say, give me the JFK files.
He can.
He can't.
He can.
He's legally allowed to do that theoretically.
He has executive. No, he has executive declassification authority. He can absolutely do it anytime he wants. I think that he ordered that it be done, and they said, whoa, wait a minute. Before we actually do that, let us brief you. And then he said, oh, okay, don't do it.
Yeah,
because of the briefing, or they just filibustered kind of.
Oh, no. I think they talked him out of it.
Oh, okay.
Just like they talked Biden out of it.
Yeah, he was on he was on a conversation, he said, with a federal judge who came out and said, I asked Trump why he didn't release it. He said, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't do it either. And it's just the mystery.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, we're always left to speculate.
I didn't know he was I mean, it's, I appreciate this has been such an education. I just assumed the CIA could say, no, sorry. But like, so they can convince the president not to release it, and the president will go, actually, you're right. It's better we don't release it.
Yes, and remember, CIA officers serve at the pleasure of the president. Right? The CIA is sort of exempt from a lot of the protections afforded the rest of the federal workforce in the Civil Service Act. And so if the president doesn't like your mustache, he can fire you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Wow.
Hmm.
Man, there must be a really compelling reason not to release those files.
I'll say. Yeah, the only time I ever heard that happen was Stansfield Turner, who was the director under Jimmy Carter. Because Jimmy Carter was a fundamentalist Baptist, he had this rule that CIA station chiefs could not live with people to whom they weren't married, right? No cohabitation. And Carter went overseas, and the station chief had a dinner for him, and he introduced the president to his live-in girlfriend. And Carter asked if they were married, and he said no. He said, you're living here together? Yes, Mr. President. He was out a week later, fired.
No way.
Yeah.
No, just because of that, because the policy he wanted to enact.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have some family values, and they instill some
Well,
value into marriage, I guess.
They did in 1978.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough. Now it could be any other.
Now they're all banging each other at the CIA. We had this joke at the CIA. I've said it before in podcasts that when you go into a meeting, never touch the table because you don't know who was having sex on it last night.
Oh man,
That's what I would imagine. That's hilarious.
great. I honestly think that's great to end on. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
that's great.
That was awesome.
John, man, it's so fun talking to you. Thank you so
The
much.
pleasure's all mine. Thanks, guys. This was great.
Yeah.
This has been great. And and so people can find you. Where do you want people to find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Substack, John Kiriakou. Everything I do, I put on Substack.
Okay, right on.
awesome.
John, thanks for your time. This is great.
Thank you.
Love to do it again soon.
I look forward to that.
Something like that. That'd be
I would
great.
love that. Yeah.
Terrific.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
John.
Cool.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.